while I wait for my panel to come on stage, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Patty Holmes. My brief bio, I'm a founder of one of the original ASX listed companies here in Australia. I am on the board of the MCIA and I am a consultant to the novel therapeutics industry, which includes medicinal cannabis. So that's my background. I've got a very good industry panel here, and our session is positioning the medicinal cannabis sector for success. So what I'd like to do is ask each of our representatives, how do we as an industry position the sector for success? We have a range of viewpoints along here, and I think the first person I'd like to go to is Peter from Cann Group, please.
Hi, listen, the perspective I would take, I think with a relatively new industry, is that there are clearly people who've stepped in to meet the needs of patients. There's obviously a lot of people who've been providing access for patients and advice and prescribing for patients. And in the background, there are obviously companies like ours who are growing, cultivating, and manufacturing and production of GMP level product. I think over time the industry is going to need to do a few things. Firstly, speaking as a local company, and most of the product at the moment is coming from overseas. I think that's about to change. So it's not just as a result of the changing legislation in July, but clearly the capacity for the industry is starting to get locally to get it right. And I think that's a very positive thing for the industry overall. But companies, I think, will face the challenge of the increasing requirements of quality, particularly as we start to scale up, particularly as demand goes up. At the moment, we know most of the products coming from overseas. That will probably change. But I think most of our success is going to be coming from the ability to really scale production, but to maintain the highest standards of quality as part of doing that. And I think that's going to be a huge challenge. And I think that's the one that the industry and certainly companies like us are going to need to really focus on from that point of view. Because there are always going to be people who are going to need the product, and there are always going to be organisations who are very good and adept at providing that in the way that the patients most need it. I think the challenge is going to be as more and more people demand that, and there are more and more requirements. And the TGA's regulations and requirements for testing, let alone going onto the RTG, which is something that I've spent many years of my life in. If you're in any doubt how difficult it's going to be, and have a look at the CMC section of, forget about what was just discussed in terms of the requirements for clinical data, have a look at the CMC section, and that's a massive barrier. So quality, consistency at scale is going to be a real challenge, I think, for the industry if we're going to truly meet the needs of patients.
And I guess that's the other thing that we've heard a lot about this morning from Jed Carney's discussion to the wonderful presentation by Hunter Land today. There is a lot of encouragement to get medicinal cannabis products onto the ARTG and hopefully onto the PBS. And I know, Joe, your company is working in this space very diligently. How do you see that? How do you see that as helping in the sector?
I think it will be, I don't know if that's on, but I think it will be incredibly exciting to have a registered product and opening access to CBD and have a clinical trial, which I think will create in its own way a momentum for the whole industry, not only for Australia but also internationally, because there's so few products that are registered. So it's a very exciting space. It's incredibly complex. But I guess to come back to your original question about how do we set ourselves for success, in any new industry, you tend to start from being all things to all people. And if you look back in terms of the way this industry grew, it grew out of an agricultural play. And I think now it's time to really refocus in terms of what you're really good at and to stick to that and not try to be all things to all people. Obviously, whether you're a private company or a public company, at one point in time, you can be a developer, you can be a biotech, but there has to be a horizon to what commercialisation looks like. And I guess that's one of the big things that we're all looking at. You know, where is my strength? Where can we win, short term and long term? And of course, we all believe in registration of medicines, particularly for patients.
Great, great. And Tim, we in the medicinal cannabis industry like to think we're unique snowflakes in the world. I know we're not. How would you look at the industry, the medicinal cannabis industry, versus other industries that you've had experience with?
Yeah, well, it's very difficult for early stage industries and early stage companies as ASX listed companies, because you tend to be funding your growth with cash and running businesses at a loss at times. So for those that don't know, there's over 2,000 companies listed on the ASX, and roughly 50% of them actually lose money, which means that they, whilst the market is there to allow fundraising and attract capital to a sector, it also takes something away from companies which they can't control, which is the whims of the market and the valuation of their company. So it is very hard. I suppose that what I would say is positioning a business or an industry where you've either got a pathway to profit or a profit focus. So therefore you remove that risk around the uncertainty of your valuation, and therefore your ability to raise capital and not dilute your shareholders. So yeah, it's extremely difficult for new industries, but it has been done before. But there's so many examples of what not to do, I think, in Australia. I think the things that work are not sector related or company related. They tend to come down to individual businesses. So I think just keep positioning the company as a sustainable, ongoing business that happens to be listed and not be, I suppose, at the mercy of the stock market needing to raise capital at the worst possible time.
Okay, great. And now, Oliver, I'd love, from an international perspective, how do you see the Australian industry, and what are the pitfalls or points of difference that we could make here?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I would start with probably the need to define success for the medical cannabis sector. And it's certainly not the financial markets who are defining success. And I see amongst a lot of my industry colleagues, in particular those who are publicly listed companies who have raised a lot of money, there's some sort of depression setting in because, of course, they have not produced the value for the shareholders which the shareholders expected. That by itself, in my interpretation, is not the definition of success. Financial markets are not a good judge of early moving sectors. We have seen the same situation in the dot-com area 20 years ago. If we would judge the amount of billions of money which were burned then in the dot-com sector and would say it was a failure, one would completely fail to recognize that the dot-com boom then created the largest digital revolution for mankind after the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the printing press. So whilst I think there's a generalized concern from a capital markets perspective that the medical cannabis sector has not, quote unquote, delivered on, I think, which were unrealistic expectations, the reality is that the work by everyone in this room and in other rooms where I'm operating, so we're in Germany, we're in South America and different places, actually has been extremely valuable. Because if you're looking at the world scale today, it looks by now that a country which doesn't have a medical cannabis regulation is the outlier. That just 10 years ago was completely unimaginable. I mean, there were like 2 countries, but by now you're asking a country that doesn't have medical cannabis regulation. That's actually weird to say, what's going on here? So I think tremendously good work has been done actually in bringing the product to the patients. But now, in my view, the industry is coming to a very important crossroad. And the crossroad is that it will potentially bifurcate into 2 places. You have the adult use sector, which is the consumer goods business on the one hand, and the medical cannabis sector, which is, I think, moving quickly towards pharma. The more we are hearing about providers with registered product, the more will become a pharmaceutical industry. So I think there's a very realistic chance here that the medical cannabis sector, as it has been defined for the last 5 years, will cease to exist in the way and with the actors we are currently having around the table. And I think that is a significant risk, because what we are seeing is that in the countries we're operating, so we have our operation in Germany, a GMP manufacturing operation for a long period of time, was a former opioid producer in Colombia. The adult use legislation is moving in so fast, much faster than anyone would have expected 10 years ago, that by the time we're going through the tribulations of what a clinical trial looks like, how the registering process works, you're starting to look at a self-medicating patient. Yeah. This is the reality, and I think that my colleague from Cann pointed this out before. And we can do a lot of conversations here about what we should do or not, but if the reality is that we are going to have an adult use market relatively soon, and we're going there fast in every single market we're operating, I think some of this conversation becomes moot, because the guy will go to the dispensary and get a gummy bear. I mean, this is literally what's happening. So on your question, positioning sector for success, I would say financial success isn't the driver of why we were doing this, and the capital markets are a very poor judge on that in an early stage of an industry. In a later stage, it's okay. I think what this sector needs to do is to ensure it actually has an existence in the world to come. If this falls into two categories, and we're consumer goods players or we're pharma, then the way we're currently configured is actually not viable.
It doesn't fit into either of them. You're exactly right. It doesn't really fit into either of them, does it? Yeah. We've got a question which actually comes back to the panel. What is the panel's view on demand for flower into the future? Flower is not a pharmaceutical format. So can I ask one of our colleagues here to, Peter?
Well, I mean, I think most of us know that probably about 75% of what's being sold at the moment is flower. Yeah. And there's probably a whole bunch of really good reasons for that. And I think your point is absolutely right, that the legalisation of perhaps what was not legal behaviour before is the first trend in the industry, and we're all rushing to meet that. Over time, I totally agree. I think that the market will split into two, and that will change demand for flower. However, having said that, the positive, I think, for the push towards flower has been that it's actually improved quality. Because in order to have a quality product that you can inhale, that sets a very different standard to the kind of quality of the product that's being grown and manufactured compared to something that's taken as an isolate or put into an oil. So that's actually been, I think, a very positive trend overall for the long term.
And I also think getting patients to transition from the illicit to licit, just for quality and safety reasons, really, like hands down.
Yeah, no, and I think yes, there's transition. Yeah. But I think the other point is that if you think about all the indications that could possibly be used in this space, and there are probably hundreds depending on how you divide them out, there's clearly the vast majority of people who are candidates for the product are not taking it now. So, and there are partially part of that reason is the product doesn't look and feel like a medicinal product yet. And so again, back to this split between the two, I think flower has a role, and I think that's the short-term play. In the longer term, probably flower will start to move into that more rec space, and there'll be a more mainstream looking kind of product that comes in the usual form that you'd find at a pharmacy.
Oliver, did you have something you'd like to add?
I think it's ultimately, well, if you look at every market around the world, flower ultimately represents the majority of the product form, and the more recreational we go, the more it will be there like that. Linking back to the prior session, making flower a pharmaceutical product, I think the Israelis with the Psyche product really set out for a very long journey, very long time ago. As he said, it was over 10 years ago, and there was a significant investment in doing that. It's the hardest part of the puzzle to crack. So and making a flower a pharmaceutical product and making it inhalable as an inhalable dosage forms just, I mean, multiplies the amount of challenges you have already going through a normal pharmaceutical registration process. It's literally so complicated, and so it will take such a long time that the dilemma I was talking about before becomes particularly prevalent. I think the Psyche product was a fantastic product, but by the time in Germany we're going adult use, I think it will be a very small number of people who will be using it. It will take a long period of time to get there. So flower will be there. It's a segmentation question. People who have been using flower all their lives in the black market, them coming to a regulated market is a good thing, no matter whether it's pharmaceutically registered or not. It's safer, it's better, it's from a social perspective better. So there's not much to be argued with. Whether you can move this into a pharmaceutical box, I think that is one of the hardest challenges, and I think putting your money on that is a risky venture and has taken people a long period of time. I think you're probably better off in some other dosage forms if you want to go down the pharma route.
Right, right. And Joe, you know, we are talking about different dosage forms, and getting a pharmaceutical-like dosage form. Is BOD doing, what kind of work is BOD doing?
Yes, so we focused on drug delivery, and so that's about, even if you talk about the recreational, there's demand for consistency of dose and expected outcome as opposed to unexpected, because vaping obviously is not the preferred dose method. So we play in that space of drug delivery and looking at fixed dose form and also standardisation so that you get a consistent effect, whether you're a patient or whether you're a rec user. So kind of that's the space we play in, and we do cross both pharma and rec. So, you know, we have very much a view around the beverage market and the CBD market and the consumer market and the opportunities there, but we definitely have a focus on medicinal cannabis as it relates to fixed dose form and a standard outcome. And I mean, I definitely think, obviously there's many markets that will open up to rec. I guess that I don't think that will then negate the role for medicinal cannabis per se in more chronic conditions where you need really high dose, you need consistency of dose, and this is not just for indications that are perhaps, you know, are self-diagnosed. But, you know, you all know severe forms where CBD and THC are being used, and that's the role that I don't think will go away, and I think there'll be significant industries in both those camps, and yeah, the way we approach it is through improving drug delivery.
Great, great. Anything to add on product formulations, Peter, or?
Listen, I think there
Because
is...
you've got, sorry,
Yeah,
Cann
we
Group
have
has
many
the-
different forms.
The gel pill technology.
Yeah, so we have a proprietary capsule product that we well and truly position into the medicinal space. That obviously has great potential and opportunity in the future, particularly for perhaps physicians and patients who are not current users. And that's something that we need to strongly explore into the future. Having said that, you know, we still want to play to the current market, and I think one of the things that's a huge advantage for a company like us is as you start to scale up quality production and you hit consistency, you can start to offer to the marketplace something that is within a tighter range, even beyond the ranges given to us through GMP. So I think that's perhaps the other part that we want to get to as well, that once you produce enough, you can start to slice various qualities of different product out, and that it gives you a total consistency play. But definitely the capsule market for us is a big play into the future. Having something that creates a better bioavailability, predictability, and with, you know, the issue of titration was discussed this morning as well. So, you know, we play in both, and it's going to take some time, I think, for truly the pure medicinal play to play out.
Right. We've got another question for the panel. My pressure point as a dispenser is the logistics. The turnaround time could take days and patients suffer. Why can't we liaise with current pharmacy wholesalers? I'm actually happy to answer. I'll go for that one. Actually, this should probably be was in the previous session, but that's cool. Because it's a special access product, that's why the wholesalers aren't. They will only deal with registered products. So being a special access product, you need to ensure that you have the TGA approval letter, whether that's the SASB or the AP, before the product can be sent to the pharmacy. So there's that intermediary regulatory compliance step that's required for a special access product rather than a registered. And that's one of the, I guess one of the things as a, looking at the industry from a broader perspective, when I feel like I'm one of the pioneers in the industry, and when we first started in 2016, 2017, the initial problems were access, price, and driving. And now here we are in 2023, and the problems are access, price, and driving. So how do we as an industry work together to address some of those issues, and where do we go with that? And I know that's kind of a thorny question, but anybody want to take a swing at it?
I probably would like to say something which linked to what he was saying before in terms of dosage forms. So what has been the challenge? The pharmaceutical dosage forms, including soft gel capsule, is our key product, so we have been developing it for 2 years. What's the challenge with it? It's pretty clear that if you're offering it the same price to the patient, that in the majority for a new user and a doctor who's not very familiar with medical cannabis, that's something they can get their head around more easily. So it's clear. What has been the challenge, of course, is that for us as manufacturers, you're making a soft gel capsule costs us about 50% more than filling a tincture bottle. Mm-hmm. So the way we particularly got around it is that we are sourcing the API from Colombia. It's a GMP API, and that's the only reason under which you actually can end up having a pharmaceutical dosage form, whether it's a capsule, a waiver, or something else, which addresses at the same time the costing issue, which is so important. We hear it all day around in the sessions to the patient. So if you just use the same cost of the API and then add on it a manufacturing cost, and it becomes the waiver, will be very expensive. And then people by definition will go to flower because it's the cheapest per milligram intake. Yeah. This is how it goes. So that's, I think, somehow it's a bit of a challenge. I think we need to get around, and this is what has been holding back pharmaceutical dosage form in the marketplace until now, which is just, if you add to an already costing $180 medicine, another $50 for the dosage form, I think fundamentally there's no business and the penetration will be very low. And that's a dilemma, I think, which you need to set up operating a bit like generics have operated, where you're sourcing in, if you do ibuprofen today, you will be sourcing in the API from India. So, I mean, it's no, I mean, you wouldn't do ibuprofen produced here at all, likely.
Having said that,
Go for it.
scaling from a local manufacturer point of view, the cost of goods benefit for that far exceeds, where we are with the stage where we are in the marketplace. And I'm not talking 5 years from now, but over the next couple of years, scaling up in a facility like ours creates massive advantage from a cost point of view. Once you've turned the place on, how much you grow in it is less of an impact on cost, and that does provide flexibility. So there is still a play that has to go through on that to bring the price down, but I'm with you. And having said that, I mean, you have a look at what GW brought to the market at $3,000 a month. If you can provide cost effectiveness to the PBS, then price suddenly, the kind of discussion we're having, which is price to the patient, obviously then becomes less of an issue. They're paying standard PBS fee, which ironically for a lot of people is not that much, distant from what they're actually paying, depending on which.
I don't want to be too scientific, but you're discounting bioavailability, and people talk about it a lot and misunderstand it actually a hell of a lot. But I challenge you because, in terms of cost to patient, if you have a unique formula and it's not just equals soft gel cap, it's an encapsulation technology, and whether you're using a lipid or a nanoparticle or whatever, or something else, you know, if you can deliver, you know, 4 times the bioavailability of a particular CBD or THC compound, cost to patient already comes down. So you reduce cost of goods, you reduce actually side effects, adverse events. So, you know, so there is other things at play there in terms of how we deliver medicines effectively.
And I agree with that. I think it makes perfect sense. If you're operating from a high API cost base, then that's what you do. I think you're doing, you know, things, bioavailability improvement. I think the issue you have is it already has been so hard for the practitioners to figure out what that hydration scheme is and what the dosage scheme is, that by the time you're starting doing this, you're changing it all over again, right? You're saying, oh, it's no longer 60 milligram per day, but it actually should be 10 milligram because I've got set formula. So it's the next challenge.
And
I think if you go through registration, then you're
and maybe that's the benefit of having 1 product, 2 product, 3 product being registered, because it becomes, you know, kind of the base case for doctors to look at. It doesn't mean they won't use other products, but at least it's sort of a gauge as to, you know, the efficacy at particular dose levels, and it will give them confidence, because obviously part of the role we play also is bringing the doctors on this journey, educating them in cannabinoid treatments, etc. So, you know, they need the research to give them confidence and also experience in terms of dosing and interaction with other drugs, etc., etc. So.
And all of this takes money.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
I might just touch on something Oliver said, which is, and just accentuate the point on just how bad financial markets are at valuing early stage products like this, but they're not just bad at valuing early stage medicinal cannabis products, they're bad at valuing early stage technology, early stage mining, early stage biotech, early stage anything. You really are playing in a field where it lends itself to huge overvaluation at times of hype, and you bring in a whole bunch of shareholders that just want more growth at any price and bigger losses, and then you go into a difficult time in the markets when you go the other way and share prices fall and everyone has to pump the brakes on growth, and it's very hard. But over time, what financial markets actually price very accurately is the value of an asset, and an asset might be a patented drug or a product or a brand or a property or something like that, and they also price earnings. By that I mean like sustainable cash flows. That so over time markets do tend to get it right, but in the early stages it is just so hard. So I suppose I was thinking about how if you look at the best companies out there that have done best by some of the great success stories of Australia in the last sort of 20 or 30 years, they've come out of very unusual industries. Not necessarily things that are breaking down barriers and doing amazing things. Rather, they've just embraced a small competitive advantage in something very boring, like might be takeaway pizza or $10 earrings or whatever it is. So the point is to zero in on that competitive advantage, which Joe mentioned before, and that building a competitive advantage and then repeating it thousands and thousands or millions of times over a number of years will build up some form of an asset or a stream of earnings that will be accurately valued over time, and that's really where I think industries like this can attempt to go, and I suppose it takes that element of lack of control out, where you're trying to sell and promote to potential new capital raisings, and imagine the stock market or the funding markets are closed for 10 years because these CEOs. I feel for you. You're trying to run a 10-year business plan with 2 years of cash or something, and it's very hard and very distracting constantly looking at how to fund that. So that would be my view on that.
So that sort of ties into a question that's come in from the crowd is, Tim, do you have a comment about how we can re-engage with capital markets, you know, following the original green rush that we had those many years ago?
It's difficult, but it's been done many times before. My advice would be to look at other industries where it's happened, and I would look at other early stage industries or
for example?
For example, mining, every commodity is an individual boom and bust cycle. Biotech has had countless. There was a buy now, pay later boom and bust. There's the US gambling deregulator. The list goes on. There's any list of those, and I think the re-engagement with the market, you've got to remember you're in a sector here that's going to have huge tailwinds and greater acceptance going forward and greater usage, and I think there's going to be a lot of well-funded and innovative and passionate people want to be joining this industry and supporting it. So I don't think the difficulty is going to be re-engaging with capital markets. It's going to be proving that there is a sustainability in the companies that are listed on the market. So, as I said, that it's just that take the risk out, which is having to report your quarterly cash flow every quarter of the ASX, and everyone looks at how much cash you got left. It'd be hugely distracting for CEOs. And so that would be my advice there. And I understand consolidation is probably a likely path forward on that, but again, you don't want to be consolidated by being vulnerable at the wrong time in the cycle, like many probably are now.
Right. Oliver, you look like you're primed.
Yeah. I think the way this is, I've seen it happen in other industries. I was before, and I was a CEO of a publicly listed company for 15 years before I came into cannabis, is that you will have a cleanup happening on both sides. So first of all, the investors who came in originally will not stay in for very much longer. They're trying to exit at this point in time. So you'll have a new shareholder base of some form, people coming in at a reset price. And by now, I think the prices of cannabis assets are pretty much at all-time low. So for people who have money, have a vision, not a financial vision, but a longer-term vision of what you're trying to build, it's actually a very good time. You will have a cleanup on the shareholder base on the one hand, new guys coming in, setting a newer entry price, and therefore there will be happy people because it cannot go much down further. Okay, so this is where we are. So that's number one. Number two, the financial investors who are in now and are disgruntled, the early guys, what they will also do is kick out the management teams, and that's already happening. So by now, every day I'm getting a message from a colleague in the industry who's looking for something new to do. And that's just the nature of, it's the beast. So, and I think this is what's happening. So in some form, you'll see a cleanup procedure, both in the shareholder base as well as in the management. And I think on top of it, I would think that a cleanup within the people who are participating in the industry. I think within 5 years of time, I can see it already. We have now specialty pharma people looking at the space. I can see it in Germany. I have nutritional and food supplement companies coming in. So I see new entrants now coming in the industry as the asset base has become cheap. I think they are now coming in. They've looked at the game for a while. They have figured out of who's playing. And I think now is the time for these guys to show up. So I think that in a poker analogy, I think a lot of new cards will be dealt and a lot of new people will be sitting around the table playing. So it's kind of a bit of a different setup. I think it was coming our way over the next, I would think, 2 to 3 years. And I think it's now at this inflection point where I see that happening.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think, Tim, maybe, with the financial markets, again, we were talking about that original green rush and how everybody had these really high expectations, which, unfortunately are mostly dashed at this point. So it will be that new wave that's coming through that have seen what's happened and have, learned from, what we've gone through here in Australia, but as well as overseas as well. What's worked in Canada, what's worked in Germany, and what hasn't worked, and what can we bring back here?
Yeah, just accepting that cyclicality of the market is something that investors struggle with, that companies struggle with that are listed. I mean, this wave of pessimism, not just in your industry, but in all small cap industries, it's been very tough for the last couple of years, and it turns, it always does. And I suppose that's what I keep coming back to. Don't be beholden to the cyclicality of the market. Use it to your advantage. There will be times when it's great and easy to be raising capital, and be times when you want to be in a position where you're well funded and not raising capital. But I would just look at the cyclicality and examples of other industries and who's done well to survive through funding droughts and the hallmarks of great companies that have grown from small bases. It's not sector specific. They come from all different industries, but the things that make them do it, or the things that they succeed at doing, are quite common across the group.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And just another question to the panel, if you had, one wish that you could if I had my magic wand and I could grant you one wish in the medicinal cannabis industry sector, what would your wish be? What would you like to see change?
Oh, I definitely want in the US, the FDA to get involved and make a clear positioning, because
because they are sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah,
You're
and
right.
that's a massive, move that would affect the whole industry globally. So I think it will come. I think it's a matter of when, but I think that the complexity of the regulatory environment in every market is just so complex, and if we can streamline some of that, then I think it will give us all some momentum.
It might put me out of a job, but yeah, I totally understand. Tim, can I grant you a wish?
Yeah, look, I after just hearing some and meeting so much passion and so much good being done by this industry, look, I think I'd wish that it succeeds, and succeed as a financial model. I don't have any expertise at all in anything you're talking about, but I hate seeing really great innovations and I know patients that are benefiting from these products, and to see it fail as a listed model would be a great shame. So I know that there's regulatory things that are making it difficult at the moment, but they will pass. But just to keep trucking on and find a model and find a competitive advantage where it's sustainable and sustainable financially, and also continue to do good things for
No, that's great. That's great, because for the patients, we can't let it fail. Sorry, that's just not going to happen.
And maybe following on from what Tim says, I would ideally like some of the stakeholders who are standing back at the moment to step in. So maybe it's investment, but it's also some of the places that I've come from, Big Pharma. I think too many people. It's clear this industry is going to be successful in the future. All these products for patients are clearly going to be successful. I think the longer various stakeholders stand back, the slower it will happen. And I think that's a shame. I think there is a time and a place now where, I'd like to see a few more stakeholders stepping in.
Such as?
I think the government has taken some, bold moves in Australia to help facilitate that. But I think the generalised pharma and investment community perhaps needs to help this fledgling industry to grow a bit faster than it is. And if that means taking a few more risks or taking a few more bets, I think rather than standing back waiting for us to either consolidate, fail or succeed, I think that would speed the process up, which is better for patients.
Yeah. And how could we do that? How could we engage more with?
Look, I think things like this and consolidating information in fact. I think this industry, from the outside, is a very misunderstood industry and has many voices and a lot of history that doesn't help. Yeah. I think as an industry, the more we can consolidate behind the cohesive arguments that we're making at sessions like this, I think that will speed that process up.
No worries. And Oliver?
Well, I think the mission we set out to accomplish when I created the company in 2018 was that cannabis medicine, at least we believe, should not be a rich man's medicine. And we're operating in a number of emerging markets who are now facing the following dilemma. They go either adult use, which means the black market comes in with a vengeance, or they go the pharmaceutical registration order and the medication is just too expensive. I mean, then we're in a Epidiolex situation where somebody putting an IP on the product, which is a plant. So I think what I would wish at least is that, and we're seeing this with the governments in some of the emerging markets, that they're taking a middle position on the cannabis, where they're saying it's a herbal medicine. And they actually do create a specific regulatory dialogue around it, which makes it affordable to the people there. So, I mean, in South America, there's no one who can pay $180 per month for medicine. Full stop. It doesn't happen. I mean, you either bring it for $20 or it's not happening. And there is no money to pay through a public health reimbursement scheme. It's the same. So what I hope is that also the regulators in the more developed markets, like here in Germany, would also see that cannabis isn't I think it's a very personalized medicine. This is, and everyone has been talking about it. The difference about driving, the driving piece is the best manifestation of how personalized it is. And trying to force fit a personalized medicine into a standardized pharmaceutical registration protocol is not easy, and we all know it. So I would hope that that is going to be recognized, that it's fundamentally a personalized medicine. And frankly speaking, the trend towards personalized medicine and self-medication is something which is coming anyway. You can see it every corner.
Yeah.
It's already here.
Yep.
So rather than trying to peg it into the existing scheme, yes, you may want to look at it differently. And I think the Australian regulations, compared to every other country where we're operating, I think is quite favorable in that sense. I think so. So I think you're on a good track here to have created a regime which is kind of sustainable, I think, around this. But I hope it not to end up being a rich man's medicine, which I think would be a total shame.
Yep, totally agree. So thank you all. Our time is coming, we've gone red on the screen. Time is coming to an end. Thank you so much for participating in our panel. Please thank our guests. And we're off to lunch, and the lunch is thanks to CBRE. Thank you very much for sponsoring our lunch today.